Hello, YouTube viewers. Welcome to my show, Rocket Monday. In today's episode, we're going to talk about NASA's lunar contracts. So let's dive right into it. Well, first we have to understand which program we are talking about. Same way Apollo was a program, this current generation program is named Artemis. Now, this Artemis is no longer like Voyager and all that jazz. It's basically targeted for crewed space for flight and with end game of actually landing on the moon. Now, this is a very big deal. You have to understand this aspect very thoroughly. Apollo project almost bankrupted NASA because it was consuming as high as 5% of national budget. To give you a context of that, their current running budget is less than 1%. So it's like if USA budget was like $100, almost $4 or $5 was given to NASA just to go to the moon. That is the sole reason why they have not returned. The mission was way too expensive, and at that time, because they were in quote war, which was Cold War, it was a very serious amount of money that was spent. But again, it's a war economy. It could be done without any concern. However, this time, America can no longer can be like bankroll all those things on its own. So they are like, okay, NASA, they're gonna partner us with ESA, European Space Agency, JAXA, Japanese Space Agency, Canadian Space Agency, and Australian Space Agency. Yes, Russian is missing so far. They may join in the future, and these will be the state side of the thing. However, this time NASA is doing something interesting and different. They are also taking the help of commercial space flight companies. So what that means simply is NASA learned this the hard way, is that if the government contracts are, there is too much bloat in that, not corruption and all that jazz. Like again, those are also there, but big issue is bloat. The government companies are not as efficient as private company, and given the fact that what we are trying to do here is already been done, like it's no longer like going into the abyss or going into the unknown. We know what we are doing, we know how to do it. So at this point in time, they want to increase the collaboration of commercial enterprise, because commercial enterprise is much more efficient. Science proved it out, government figured it out, and after this they are like, okay, commercial, you just make it cheap enough. And their main aim is return humans to moon by 2024. Now be mindful, this time Artemis is completely different than Apollo, simply because that's not the end game, that's the beginning, that's like starting point. This time they're gonna build a base on moon, brick by brick. It's not something like one landing done complete moon base. They're like brick by brick, they will start landing, scout out places, figure out the supply chain, basically where they're gonna get water from, or rocket fuel and all that jazz, and then slowly build it. Like this is the whole point. It's no longer go there and come back. No, it's like go there, figure out how things work, come back, then go there again, and then lay on the foundation. And like it's literally building a lunar colony. Like this is the first step of lunar colony, and that is why they are sidestepping lunar gateway, because again lunar gateway is more of a political tool rather than an actual engineering useful thing, because everything tangibly coming out of it, it comes at a cost of like, yeah, everything would be delayed 10 years, and any Tom, Dick and Harry knows that if you delay something 10 years, it's like you might as well not do it. So this is why NASA is like sidestepping. It's like, okay, we want that. Like they still want that lunar gateway, but the sole reason lunar gateway is even built is that ISS is about to expire, and if ISS expires, nobody has the enough will to build their own space station. At that time, if China starts to build a space station, which they are already working on, that could be very politically, let's just say, not cool. Let's just say that. So lunar gateway is kind of like holding the world together in that troubled time. So they know they have to build that, but they're like side loading it. Like let's get to the moon first. Now, what is NASA's goal here? NASA's goal is Artemis 1 test flight supposed to happen in 2021, Artemis 2 2022, Artemis 3 2024. Now, this is the main game. This is the end game. So, human landing system, and this time they are solely focusing on cost, because everything that is needed, we know how it works. Like we got this, we know how it works. We just want to make it better, more reliable, and more variant, because they want competition. Now, what do I mean by competition here? Think of this way. Let's say you build Falcon 9. Somebody else is like, okay, this is a Falcon 9, but made by me, different variety, different specification. But the core concept is very simple. NASA does not want that. They are like, okay, SLS behaves like this. It has this kind of operational principle. That's option number one. Option number two has to be completely different. It has to be like, okay, it's a reusable rocket. Okay, option number three, it has multiple small rockets. Okay, that's how they are working. Like every option on the table should be completely different than each other. So in case of a failure, let's say SLS have some fallout, and they're like, okay, SLS is grounded. They should not reach in a point where space shuttle left them is like, dude, we can't do anything else. So this time they have to have multiple paths. And the main announcement happened on April 30th, 2022. 2022, so I'm saying sorry about that, 2020. And NASA got $1 billion from government, and NASA is like, okay, we're gonna give this to the contender. Now, be mindful when I'm saying the money to the contender, it's early development money. It's no longer like, okay, this is the money, get the project done. It's not for that. It's mainly NASA is gonna bankroll your progress for a little bit, and you have to deliver your milestone, whichever you have to decide. Like SpaceX, for SpaceX delivery, it's like they will demonstrate in orbit refueling, so that NASA will take them to stage two once they have done that. So all the money that SpaceX is getting is they have to show that they can do that part. Okay, that's one. Then they will Blue Origin. Like Blue Origin is like, dude, we can do lunar orbit in, let's say, 2022. Well, you have to do that. It's like your own timeline, and NASA will verify that. And same with the other companies. So like, this is the deadline we will reach in this time, and then we will go to second stage, because right now this three contender are very unlikely that the likelihood of all three succeeding at the same time is very likely to zero. And not to mention, NASA does not actually want three contender to survive. Two is more than enough. So for monetary reason, obviously. And even if, let's say, all three start to get very close, even if they cancel someone, they will still learn a lot in terms of knowledge and in database. So that is why NASA is like, spreading out their bets. The first contender that nobody even heard about it, like in terms of popularity wise, is Dynetics. Now, Dynetics, it's unknown in space industry, but is thoroughly known in defense department and a military contractor, simply because it has years of experience. And when I say years, I mean decades of experience with US military. So they have a clearance, they have a reach, and they have actual, history where they're like, dude, you ordered us to build this, we built it, we delivered it to you. So they have that kind of like, actually we know how to deliver things. On top of that, now you might be like, hey, building a spacecraft that actually lands on the moon and safely takes off, it's much more difficult. They have 25 subcontractors working below them, each of them specializing in some parts that have worked one way or the other in other space industries. So they have very, very thorough experience pool, so to say. So that's why they are in like, so ahead. Randomly people like, dude, what the hell this company came from, because they have that 25 subcontractor. And their main selling point, like why NASA chose this system, is like, this one thing lands and takes off, that's it, on moon. I'm not talking from Earth, on moon, basically from lunar orbit to lunar surface to lunar orbit again. One thing does that. The only thing it disposes of is external tanks. So basically at the launch they will have 4 tanks, and 2 tanks will be jettisoned during descent. So the reason is like, they will drain the 2 extra tanks. Once it's done, they will jettison, the main engine will start to use the fuel of the main tanks, but they will not consume too much fuel. Not to mention, you have already slowed down by using those propellant, and not to mention the tank weight is also reduced. So this lot of fuel will be still remaining, and this is very close to the surface. So getting off of the lunar platform would be very easy for this. And that is a very critical aspect you have to think about. Like, you cannot have a scenario where like just getting off of that is a very dangerous stuff, because you are in space in a low gravity environment without like any sort of support structure. So it could be very dangerous. So it has some unique advantages. That is why this was selected. Now this has to figure out how to do refueling in orbit. Almost every design we have right now is like trying to do refueling in orbit. Disposable fuel tanks, again, it has been done, but generally what we do is dump the whole stage. They want to dump fuel tanks only. The core reason for that, it would be cheaper and much reusable, because engines are the main expensive boy. If you can just dump the fuel tanks that could be made of steel, not too much of a big deal. And the main point is, this is launchable on multiple rockets, because the original design was created for SLS. SLS is nowhere to be found, so they're like, okay, this design can be sent on other rockets also. That is very critical this time for NASA. It's like, they do not want to be in the same state where they were in after the fall of space shuttle. They're like, dude, can your payload be sent on this? Awesome. Can your payloads be sent in this? Awesome. Like, they need bare minimum like 2 to 3 launch providers per payload. So Dynetics was getting a very big green light and a lot of money. Second position in terms of money. Then we come to the big daddy, the Blue Origin. The Blue Origin is getting a very big chunk of money from NASA, and the reason for that is Blue Origin is no longer working as Blue Origin. They are working as what we call national team. Now in that national team, there are 4 big boys, which are Lockheed Martin. I'm reasonably sure you know them. Northrop Grumman and Draper. All of these puppies, they are consuming a lot of money of that. Benefit, so many of them have a very vast experience with working with many military projects and space projects indirectly also, and sometimes directly with NASA's and all that. So that is why their budget requirement is so damn high. Now their landing design so far is literally ditto copy from the Apollo system. It is inherently simple, inherently reliable, every aspect of this is very take Apollo, update it to the new standards, and because this project was done under basically a few years ago, during Blue Origin's early days, they were already planning this for as a add-on module for lunar gateway. So NASA really likes this idea, because if this works, and let's say they're like, okay, we got the lunar landing pad, now what? We need that orbital system. Tada! The system can do two in one. So for this reason, it has a very high like ratio in NASA. They're like, yeah, if we do this, we take care of two things in one go. So this is getting a lot of money, and not to mention, NASA is very clear about this. The reason why they are getting money is simply because they are asking for it. And again, the more money you ask, the more NASA will be like, bro, why do you need this kind of money? And Blue Origin is like, just look at our contractors. And not to mention, if you take care of us, we're gonna take care of two of your projects at the same time. So this is the whole point. And this also system is designed also in such a way that it can be launched from multiple rockets. That part is very critical this time around. And in terms of design development, they are very ahead. They're almost possibly able to do this before 2024. They can do it. They like in terms of human landing, not in terms of test launch. That can be done very quickly. But because the world ended, so human man force is very low right now. So this is Blue Origin, biggest in terms of money. Then we come to SpaceX. Now this was kind of surprising for people, because again, SpaceX is all the good things you talk about SpaceX is awesome, but they have one problem: Elon Musk's mouth and his very liberal disregard of timelines. And again, it's his own fault itself. I'm reasonably sure many years ago he was claiming like we're gonna land people on Mars on 2018, then 2020. I'm like, dude, you have not even launched a single dude to space. And again, that's the whole point. It takes space industry takes time, but the more lavish things you want to do, more time it takes. So NASA was not but flat out, even NASA's administration is like, SpaceX is very bold and all that, but they learn from their mistake. They are like, dude, we have this fault, let's fix it. So that iteration gave NASA is like, we should also back this horse. So that is why they're getting very little amount of money. And the craft that they are building, they realized it very early on, is that the system design that you see cannot land on Mars or Moon, especially Moon, without landing pad. Like, why the heck it needs landing pad? Well, basically the craft is too huge. What does that mean? That means the engines are too powerful. They have to be, otherwise they will not be able to slow it down. But what happens when you do that? You basically create a crater where you are landing, and because Moon does not have an atmosphere that will slow down the particles, those particles can literally end up in orbit, which is a really bad thing. On top of that, the soil is no longer that strong. It does not even have the gravity. It's like, okay, you landed a 60-ton thing, it can handle itself. No, it can topple over. So all those things was like, I did not thought of that, but apparently that's a very serious thing. It's like, bro, you cannot land your stuff safely and make sure that your engine nozzles are safe, because even if you have landing legs, how far can you extend them? And not to mention, the bounce back will be very serious. So they had to redesign it. So the way to redesign it, and not to mention they had to do this in 4 years, they're like, okay, this will become use and throw. So what does that mean? That simply means it will be launched from Earth, park in the orbit, refueled in the orbit, then it will go to the lunar surface and land. Now to land, this time they're gonna use 6 to 9 engines. That design is not finalized yet, and this will be different engines, but this will be mounted very top, almost like around 40% mark from bottom, and not 40%, 60% from the bottom. And the reason for that is the plume will spread out and it will no longer be destructive to the surface. And these engines will be very small. Like the main Raptor engines will slow it down, but Raptor is like a sword. For final landing, they will employ these small engines, and these will be like very gentle. So to make sure that you do not sink where you land. Now that is the problem. How the heck they're gonna build that engine? They have to build a new engine in 4 years. That's very tricky. So even though NASA is kind of optimistic with that, they are like very careful. It's like you have to demonstrate something. For SpaceX, demonstration is they have to show refueling in order to go to second stage funding. If they fail to show refueling, or dude, we are already done, we'll launch it in 1-2 month delay, that's acceptable. I'm talking, if they're like 2023 and they haven't even launched anything, that point like NASA will be like, bro, done. So they have to do orbital refueling and new engines. Now you might be like, why not simply use Draco? Draco is awesome and all that jazz, but it's a different system in terms of fuel. They ideally want to use the same fuel and oxidizer they're using for main engines, and they can't use the Raptor here because again, Raptor inherently is a very big engine. So what does that mean? That simply means it does not have spool up and spool down capacity that is fine-tuned enough. Basically, you cannot. It's like whoosh, and then you're like, oh, okay, slow down. Whoosh. Like the speed is not very fine-tunable. So that engines are the biggest hurdle. because they are bypassing the heat shield and all that jazz. They basically simplifying the development cost, but that engine is consuming all that time. So can they do this in 2024? Unlikely. And not to mention because of SpaceX, because the world has ended, simply because they do not have enough manpower needed for this kind of thing. And not to mention, the moment economic crisis will hit us in around 2 years, that would be very devastating. So likelihood of all this happening before 2024, it's very low, like really low chance. So these are the three contenders, and do not rush into the designs and try to analyze it, because these are very early stage. They could change hundreds of things, again within reason, because you gave your design to NASA and you have to be like held accountable. But design will still change, because this is not the final design. This is just a, like, okay, we think you can do something, do it in the given timeline, and then we're gonna see what else we can do. So this was my presentation on three champions of this race. Let's see how it unfolds. And so far, I would urge you to relax, because it takes time. This kind of mission takes time, inherently so. And if you liked this presentation, please click the like button, share it amongst your friends. That will help me a lot. If you didn't like it, didn't enjoy it, I'd urge you to press dislike, press it twice to show me extra disappointment, and please leave a comment, because I try to reply to all of them. Subscribe, press the bell icon if you feel, and as always, thanks for watching.